My name is Dr. Thomas Miller. I'm 48 years old. Death wasn't supposed to find me in that hospital bed. I was the physician, not the patient. The one who made the difficult calls, who held the line against the chaos, who tried to comfort families as they watched their loved ones slip away through a screen. But my heart stopped. And in those moments between one life and the next, I found myself face to face with Jesus Christ. What he revealed to me about the COVID-19 pandemic, about the deeper spiritual wounds it inflicted on souls like mine, changed everything I thought I knew about God, about suffering, and about myself. This isn't just my near-death experience, it is a message I was sent back to share. On January 5th, 2021, I died in the ER of Detroit General Hospital, the same chaotic, overwhelmed emergency room where I'd worked for 22 years. It's still strange to say those words out loud. I was the one who was supposed to be in control. I was a senior ER doctor, a man who thrived on pressure, who was trained to see the human body as a complex machine that could be fixed. Then the pandemic hit. We weren't just a hospital anymore, we were a war zone. I remember the sound most of all, the constant, piercing cacophony of alarms from ventilators and heart monitors, a symphony of crisis that never ended. We were full beyond full. Patients on gurneys lined the hallways, their labored breathing a constant, harrowing soundtrack. I saw more death in a single week than I had in the first decade of my career. Young, old, healthy, sick, the virus didn't discriminate. Back then, people on the outside called us heroes. They put up signs and clapped at 7 p.m. But inside those walls, I didn't feel like a hero. I felt numb, a machine running on stale coffee and pure adrenaline, moving from one dying patient to the next without a moment to process, without a moment to grieve. I lived alone in a quiet suburban house that felt too big and too empty. My golden retriever, Max, was the only heartbeat waiting for me at home. I'd come in before sunrise and leave long after dark, too physically exhausted to cook, too emotionally drained to even read or turn on the TV. Some nights I'd just sit in my armchair in the dark, still in my scrubs, the silence of the house a deafening contrast to the noise of the ER, just staring at nothing until the sun came up and it was time to do it all over again. My ex-wife Helen and I had split years before COVID. We had wanted a family, but it never happened for us, and the quiet grief of that had eventually worn us down, creating a distance we couldn't bridge. The silence in the house used to feel peaceful. During the pandemic, it started to feel like a judgment, a punishment for a life I hadn't built. I had one sister, Maria. We hadn't spoken in nearly 5 years. A foolish, bitter argument over our parents' will, who got what, who felt more slighted, had escalated into a cold, stubborn silence. Our mutual pride did the rest. I told myself it didn't bother me. But on the long, sleepless nights, I'd find myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. A picture of us as kids on a fishing trip with our dad, both of us grinning, holding up a tiny perch like it was a trophy. I'd wonder if she was okay, if she ever thought of me, and a deep, lonely ache would settle in my chest. I was raised Methodist, but after watching so many good people die, so randomly, so cruelly, I stopped praying. Faith felt like a cruel joke. God became a comforting hypothesis I no longer had any evidence for. I didn't need faith, I had science, I had data, I had protocols. But the truth was, I was breaking apart on the inside, piece by piece. I just didn't know how to admit it, even to myself. Maybe you know what that feels like. When you keep moving so you don't have to feel. When your life is full of urgent tasks, but your heart feels hollow. When you pour every ounce of yourself into helping others, because it's easier than facing the depths of your own pain. I remember one night it was 3 a.m., the nadir of the human spirit. I was in the doctor's lounge, staring at a cold cup of coffee I had forgotten I'd poured. My colleague and friend David had just lost his second patient that shift, a woman in her 30s with 2 young kids. He came in, sat next to me, and just put his head in his hands. He didn't make a sound, but his shoulders shook with silent, ragged sobs. I didn't comfort him, I couldn't, I just put a hand on his shoulder. My own heart felt like a block of ice. I thought, is this who I am now? A machine in a white coat, incapable of feeling anything. It was around that time that I started feeling sick, a cough I couldn't shake. Just fatigue, I told myself, a side effect of the constant stress. But the fever came on fast, and the tightness in my chest became a familiar, terrifying weight. One evening, I collapsed in my own kitchen while trying to open a can of soup. My neighbor, seeing Max barking frantically at the window, found me and called 911. I barely remember being admitted to my own ER, but I do remember the look of fear in the eyes of the young resident who was taking my vitals. I had worn that same look dozens of times on the other side of the bed. Next thing I knew, I was the one in the hospital gown, connected to the orchestra of tubes and machines. A few days in, my lungs gave out. I was intubated. They put me into a medically induced coma to give my body a chance to fight. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, but somewhere deep inside, in the last flicker of consciousness, I was still aware. And then one night, everything stopped. I later heard from my team that my heart flatlined for nearly 7 minutes. My colleagues, my friends, the people who knew my jokes and my habits, they worked on me. They fought to bring me back. But while they were fighting for my life down there, I was somewhere else entirely. And even though I had walked away from him, he never stopped watching me. I know that now. But at the time, lying in that bed, I thought my story was over. What came next changed everything, and it wasn't just about me, it was about all of us. I remember the moment I let go. It was a quiet slipping, like a thread gently pulling loose from a tightly woven fabric. One moment I was surrounded by the hum and whoosh of the ventilator, and the next, silence. Total, perfect, profound silence. At first I panicked. There was no pain, but I didn't know where I was. There was nothing to see, no body to move. But I was still me. I still had thoughts, awareness, and I was terrified. Am I dying then? No. A new thought settled in with calm certainty. I think I already did. It's hard to explain what it's like to realize your body isn't with you anymore. Then out of the nothing came light. A soft glow at first, like sunrise filtering through closed eyelids. Then it grew, not blinding but warm, alive. It wrapped around me like a thick, invisible blanket. And with that light came a peace I have never known, not even in the happiest moments of my life. You know that feeling when you come home after a long, exhausting day and finally sink into your favorite chair. Multiply that by 1,000,000, that's what it felt like. I just existed in this light, and it was so quiet. Not an empty quiet, but a full, heavy stillness that made my soul want to weep with relief. Then I saw it, my body below me. I was looking down at myself in the hospital bed, surrounded by a flurry of movement. Doctors and nurses, my colleagues, my friends, were working desperately. I saw David doing chest compressions. I saw a nurse crying as she pushed medications into my IV. I heard someone shouting my name, Thomas. They kept saying it over and over. I should have felt panic, but I didn't. I felt a wave of overwhelming gratitude. Watching them fight for me made me love them even more, but I also knew I wasn't going back, not yet. The light around me began to shift, to open up like the petals of an impossibly large flower. I started to move, drawn gently by a current. There was no fear, just the soft hum of peace growing louder, until it turned into something like music without sound, like joy turned into color. That's when I knew I wasn't alone. I didn't see him at first, I felt him. It was as if every part of my being, every cell, every memory, every scar was being filled up with a love that said, I made you, I never stopped watching you, I never left you, not for a single second. And then there he was, Jesus, my soul just knew. His presence was like fire and water all at once, gentle but powerful, radiant but soft. His eyes, I can't describe them fully. They were strong and piercing, yet they held a deep, aching sorrow, as if he had seen every moment of suffering I'd witnessed, and had felt it all with me, more deeply than I ever had. He looked right at me and said my name, Thomas. That's all it took. The moment I heard him say my name, something broke inside me. Years of hardness, of cynicism, of the professional armor I wore to survive. It all shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. I fell to my knees, or what felt like knees, and I wept. Not just cried, but sobbed like a little child, great, heaving, soul-cleansing sobs. I wanted to apologize, to hide, to explain away my unbelief, but I couldn't form the words. I didn't have to, he already knew everything. Every harsh word I'd spoken to a junior resident. Every time I'd rolled my eyes when a family said, "We're praying for a miracle." Every time I had sat alone in my silent house whispering, "Where are you?" even though I claimed I didn't believe. And still, he looked at me with a love that erased every ounce of my shame. He reached toward me, not physically, but spiritually, and lifted me up. Not just my form, but my heart, my shame, my profound grief, all of it. He held me without touching me. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel like a doctor or an ex-husband or a failure. I just felt like a son, his son. I don't know how long we stayed like that. There's no time in that place. But I could have stayed forever, wrapped in his light, held by his truth, completely and totally known. I cried for every patient I lost, for every wall I built, for every holiday I spent alone, for my sister, for the man I used to be, the one who thought strength meant never breaking. Jesus didn't speak right away. He just let me feel it all, as if he was saying, "I saw it all, Thomas, I was there, and I never left you." And the crazy thing is, I believed him. More than that, I knew it was true. He had been there all along. The light grew around us again, and he motioned for me to walk with him. We were in the light still, but it was shifting, making space for something deeper. Jesus turned toward me and raised his hand. And suddenly I saw everything, not like a movie, but as a living, moving reality. We were standing inside an ICU room. A young man lay in the bed on a ventilator, alone. A nurse stood at his side, holding his hand. I realized with a jolt that it was me, years ago. I watched myself lean in close and whisper to the unconscious patient, "You're not alone, I'm right here with you." Jesus looked at me. "You thought I was absent," he said softly. "But I was in every room, every tear, every hand held. I was in your compassion, even when your faith was gone. You weren't just a doctor, Thomas. You were my hands, my heart, my light in the darkness. You saw the pain," Jesus said, "and you wondered, where is God in this? You hardened your heart to protect it, but the truth is, your heart was never meant to carry that weight alone. It was meant to be a vessel for my strength, not a fortress for your own." Then he waved his hand again. This time I saw the hallways, the break rooms, the parking garages of hospitals all over the world. I saw nurses crying alone in their cars, doctors sitting with their heads in their hands, families hugging iPads to say a final, pixelated goodbye. A world in grief, struggling to breathe, together yet so alone. "This sickness was not from me," Jesus said, his voice full of a divine grief. "But I allowed it to shake what could be shaken." "Why?" I whispered, the question that had haunted me for years. "Why let any of it happen?" Jesus turned to me, his eyes deep with both sadness and hope, to wake the sleeping, to soften the hardened, to break the world's illusion of control. Not to destroy, but to make room for mercy, to remind the world that life is not just breath and bones. It's love, it's connection, it's the unseen that holds the scene together. I stood there undone. I thought about all the nights I had walked past families on ventilators, past colleagues who smiled but were crumbling inside. How many had shut off their hearts to survive, just like I had? "You weren't the only one who stopped believing," Jesus said gently. The world grew cold, distracted, proud, blind to true compassion. He showed me more scenes, people scrolling past cries for help on their phones, arguing over masks while their neighbors died in silence, families divided over politics instead of uniting in love. "This sickness," he said, "went deeper than the lungs. It infected the soul." Tears streamed down my face. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I didn't know it was this bad." Jesus nodded, sorrow in his eyes. "That is why I allowed the shaking, to bring sight to the blind. To remind them that they need me, not just when life falls apart, but always. I do not force myself into locked hearts, but I never stop knocking, and I never stopped knocking on yours, Thomas." My knees buckled again. I wept, not just for me, but for the world. For every nurse, every doctor, every father, every child who had to die alone. For every hardened heart, for the ones who turned away, for the ones who gave up. Then Jesus placed his hand over my heart, though there was no body, and I felt it, a love that was fierce, holy, and healing. You thought your unbelief and your anger kept me away, he said. But your love for others, even when you were numb, opened a door that I never stopped waiting at. I looked up at him. I don't want to leave. Please let me stay here. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened a new vision. This time I saw children, so many children. Some were in hospital beds, some were sitting alone in bedrooms with tear-streaked faces, some were smiling but hollow inside. I saw teenagers hiding behind screens, little ones curled up in fear. And then adults, millions of them, walking through life as if they were asleep. And I felt it, their pain, their longing, their confusion, their desperate need to know they were seen. Then Jesus looked into my eyes and said, "They need to know I am near. They have been told I am a myth, that science can replace me, that love is weakness, that suffering proves I am not real. But I am, and I have never stopped loving them, just like I never stopped loving you." I was shaking, but how, I asked. How do I help them? I'm just one person, a broken person. He smiled, "That's all I need." But I'm not even strong, I said. I barely made it through my own life. Jesus touched my cheek with the gentlest kindness I have ever known. "That is why I chose you. Not because you were strong, but because you now know that you are not, and now you know where true strength comes from." The light around us pulsed again, and I realized something was changing. I was being pulled, not violently, but like a tide gently turning. "No," I said, panicking, "please don't make me leave." Jesus looked at me, sadness and strength both in his gaze. "Your mission is not finished." "I don't want to go back," I pleaded. "I want to stay with you." He knelt in front of me, though he didn't have to, and met my eyes. "Thomas, you have seen the truth. You have felt my love. Now you must carry it to those still walking in the darkness." His voice grew softer. "Tell them I never left, I never stopped loving, and even in their deepest suffering, I am near." "But what if they don't believe me?" I asked, my old cynicism flaring for a moment. "They will feel it," he said with certainty. "In your words, in your eyes, in the way you love them without needing anything in return." I felt the pull again, this time stronger. "I'm scared," I whispered. "I know," he said, "but I will be with you." Then he placed something into my spirit. Not a physical object, but a knowing, a weightless, burning truth. And as the light around us began to fade, I heard his final words. "Tell the hurting, tell the proud, tell the forgotten and the faithful, I am still knocking, and my love still saves." Then, just like that, everything went dark. When I woke up, I didn't open my eyes right away. I couldn't, it was too much. The weight of my body, the stiffness of my limbs, the sound of machines beeping again. It all felt foreign, like squeezing back into a life that no longer fit me. And yet I knew exactly where I was. I was back. Back in the same hospital bed, in the same room, back in the world where people hurt and cry and carry on like nothing ever happened. Except something had happened. I had met Jesus, and I was not the same. The first thing I felt, before pain, before confusion, was grief. Not because I was alive, but because I had left him. Leaving that place, leaving his presence, it tore at something deep inside me. I wanted to cry, but the breathing tube in my throat held the sound inside. For days I drifted in and out of consciousness. My team had saved me. I later found out that David, my friend from the doctor's lounge, had been the one leading the code team on me. When he saw my heart restart, he had to leave the room for a moment, overwhelmed. He told me later, "Something told me not to give up on you, Thomas. I felt, I don't know, like someone else was with us." I nodded. I knew who it was. When the breathing tube was finally removed, I whispered my first words with cracked lips and a dry throat. "Jesus is real." The nurse beside me, a woman who had seen too much death, paused and her eyes softened. "I believe you," she whispered back. Recovery was slow. I had to relearn how to walk, how to eat solid food, how to breathe without effort. But the hardest part wasn't physical. It was carrying what I had seen back into a world that hadn't seen it. Everything looked different, the hallways, the faces, the chatter. People were still arguing about politics, still rushing to meet quotas, still glued to their phones and their to-do lists. And I just wanted to grab them and say, none of that matters. You're missing what really matters. But I knew I had to be patient, so I started small. The first person I called was my sister, Maria. I stared at her number for 10 full minutes before pressing the call button. My hands shook. We hadn't spoken in 5 years. She answered on the second ring, Thomas. Her voice was cautious, wary. I broke into tears before I could even say hello. And somehow, without needing an explanation, she just said, "It's okay, I've missed you too." That weekend, we had coffee. No drama, no rehashing the old argument, just two siblings sitting in a quiet diner like time hadn't stolen a half-decade from us. She told me about her kids. I showed her a photo of Max, my dog. We laughed, we cried, and before I left, she hugged me tight and said, "You seem different, lighter." I smiled. "Yeah," I said, "I am." I also went back to work, but not in the same way. I cut back my hours. I no longer picked up double shifts to avoid going home to an empty house. I no longer measured my worth by the number of patients I could save in a day. Now I care differently. I sit with people longer. I look them in the eyes when they speak. I ask their names and I hold their hands when they are scared. I don't just treat symptoms anymore, I see souls. I talk about Jesus when the moment is right, not with pressure, not with fear, but with a quiet truth. I told one young mother dying of cancer about the light, about the peace, about how Jesus never leaves us even when we feel forgotten. She wept. She said she used to believe, but life had made her bitter. I smiled gently and said, "He still believes in you." I also changed how I live at home. I started spending time with people again, not just out of duty, but because I truly want to connect. I joined a small group at a local church. I volunteer on weekends. I visit my sister's family every month. I even started journaling, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. It helps me hold on to what I saw, what I felt, because it's so easy to forget. The world tries very hard to make you forget. The bills, the deadlines, the news cycles, the fear. But I refuse to forget. I live with eternity in my mind now. Not in a way that makes me want to escape this life, but in a way that makes me want to live it better. I still get tired, I still mess up. I still have days where I feel small, but now I know that I am never alone. If you're hearing this, maybe you've felt what I felt. Maybe you're tired, maybe you've lost someone. Maybe you've stopped believing because the pain of the world was too much. I understand, but please listen to me. Jesus never stopped loving you. He doesn't wait for perfect people. He meets us right in our mess, in our grief, in our doubt. I spent my whole life trying to stay strong, and it almost killed me. Now I know that strength isn't never breaking. Strength is letting yourself be loved anyway. So if your heart is tired, if your spirit feels numb, if you're walking through life just trying to survive, please hear this. There is more. There is a God who still knocks on the door of your heart. He never left. He never will. My name is Thomas. I died. I met Jesus. And I came back to tell you, you are seen. You are loved. And he is still here.